Welcome and thank you for joining today's discussion. I'd like to thank the Hurford Foundation for their support and the panelists who join us today to share some of their experiences. My name is Margarita Valdes. I'm a youth activist from El Salvador, where I work at the Democracy, Transparency, and Justice Foundation. Currently, I'm the 2013 Hurford Youth Fellow with the World Youth Movement for Democracy. During my time here in Washington, I will be conducting research and online discussions on ways to strengthen youth participation through anti-corruption initiatives. This morning, today's discussion features youth activists from Paraguay, Bangladesh, and Uganda as they try to pinpoint how corruption manifests itself in their countries and their regions. We try to identify some possible origins or reasons for corruption and also share some successful strategies that they have used to fight corruption on the ground. Each panelist will have 5 to 7 minutes for their initial presentations, and then I will open the floor to any questions or comments. For those of you watching, please send us any questions or comments through the hashtag WYMD Live and or also follow us on Twitter as WYMD. Now, with that said, I would like to introduce our first panelist. His name is Ahmed Hadji. He is from Uganda. He is a team leader at the African Youth Development Link. He is an accredited international election observer in Africa and among the founders of the Green Light Movement Uganda. Ahmed?
Thank you very much. My name is Ahmed, as I've been introduced, and majorly what I do is I work with young people, I work for young people, and it's something that I'm passionate about. And it's a pleasure being part of this panel, and I must say that a very good morning to everyone. It's really an afternoon here. So, and the topic of today's discussion on the panel is something that really touches on everyone, me inclusive. You know, the entire world. Issues of corruption have been a problem, majorly to the public and the private institutions. And for the case of Uganda, within the context of Uganda, the World Bank report of last year, that was 2012, puts Uganda to losing close to about 300 million US dollars per year through corruption, and this manifests itself in so many ways, either through bribery or public embezzlement of funds that are intended to improve service delivery or create opportunities for the young people in form of job opportunities, avail better health services, or facilitate infrastructure development. And this has been very, very much common in key strategic areas of procurement, as we've come to realize that that's where we lose close to about 70% of the monies that are intended to boost service delivery. And we've also come to realize that recently the World Bank still was rating Uganda as one of the highest destination of doing business. Not in terms of the positive stripes that come with it, but you just have to pay a lot of money, for example, to buy off a few guys who work with the registration bureau, the tax authority guys, because it's something that is embedded within the entire institutional framework, and it compromises on the key principles that Uganda signed up to the UN Convention Against Corruption. But we often see that most of these commitments are not have not been honored. Honestly, we have laws in place, we have institutions. For example, we have the Inspectorate of Government Office that is mandated under our Constitution of 1995. That is something sort of an ombudsman that oversees corruption-related cases. Any allegations or investigations are investigated, and the culprits are brought to book. But of course, the courts of law, we have so many such institutions. Within our parliament, we have the Public Accounts Committee, where civil servants and the private sector, guys who interact with the government, oftentimes give account to how they conduct their businesses. But the challenge to that is you have a regime that has been there for the last like 25 years, and it's the regime that determines who sits in most of these accountability kind of institutions. So we've seen cases of corruptions being waived. We've seen individuals, because many of them are loyal to the regime, they walk out scot-free. And recently we had a very huge loss of close to about 100 million US dollars that was meant for northern Uganda rehabilitation programs, supporting youth programs, women, and mothers that are about to give birth with better health facilities. That was funded by prominent people, influential in this government, people who we believe seem to be people of integrity, but choose to act otherwise. But as civil society activists, more especially as young activists, we don't appreciate what is going on, and lots of things have been going on. For example, we have a campaign called the Black Monday campaign. It's Black Monday because we choose to on a Monday wear black. In solidarity, to show that we are not happy with, we are mourning with whatsoever activities are going on, by naming and shaming, those individuals who are culprits, or who are suspected to be, who are associated, either their families, to be behind all these, so many corruption-related tendencies that we're having. We've also chosen to avoid their businesses if we feel that there are any links to their ties or any of their family members. We choose not to publicly support them, because in a way you're contributing towards corruption indirectly. And the other method is we avoid their functions as well. If I know, for example, we have an event and one of them is going to give a speech or something, so we choose to really and we've been doing this in solidarity with so many people in the private sector, and we've been massively through the media trying to facilitate investigative cases through journalism, through blogs, through all sorts of campaigning or social movement methodologies, to try to amplify the voices and send a message to them that that this is not what we wish for our country, because we want a nation that is transparent, that is honest, a nation that values that holds its values so strong, a nation that believes that if you're to succeed, you just have to work hard for you to be able to succeed, but not other than benefiting at the cost of the few and costing us a lot of money. The other last issue that I wish to really mention is it's because of corruption that we've had so many development partners pulling out. We're losing, for example, our budget. They've been facilitating our budget close to about 25% of our total budget is facilitated by development partners. Because of the scenario that happened in the office of the Prime Minister, we are losing close to about 25% of that support. And that means that we are the ones to facilitate our budget this year. That means that, the money, the would-be money coming from the development partners will be, paid by the locals or the citizens in form of so many taxes that have been introduced. Actually, one of the debates that I was having in Parliament this afternoon when I was meeting the committee, that why is it that you're taxing, like water, basic water, domestic water in an urban area? That means that, there are issues to do with those who are poor. It might compromise with their access to better services. But that's some of the things we're doing, and we're writing, we're speaking a lot about it in radios, we're moving around, in so many campaigns and amplifying our voices in any way we can. But it's a very, very big issue, and we appeal for international cooperation, so that even those that we know have accounts in the US, please, you can freeze them. And I think or deny them even a visa to come to their countries, because we feel that this is something we cannot take up as us alone. It requires a concerted effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. That's a very interesting introduction to the topic of corruption. I do agree with you that corruption is a way that stops development in a lot of countries, and it ends up being a way of denying people basic rights or basic services like water that you were just talking about. And it ends up with citizens paying the consequences of these corrupt acts. Next, I would like to move on with presenting Sadia Doha. She is a team leader I'm sorry, she is a youth leader for Transparency International and Bangladesh Young Professionals Against Corruption. Sadia has coordinated and participated in several awareness and advocacy campaigns as well as workshops against corruption. So Sadia, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Margarita. Hello, David. Hello, Ahmed. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank this initiative to bring us together from different continents on one single topic that we are fighting against, which is corruption. And I'm very sad to say that yes, Bangladesh is among one of the most corrupted country in the world. And I think last year we stood like 13th, which is like an improvement for us because we stood first so many times in last few decades. So for Bangladesh, corruption is as Ahmed said, in Bangladesh, corruption is like part of our culture, and we are not ashamed of it, not yet, and we are like, it's kind of our regular practice. What we do is like drinking water, or it's like brushing your teeth. And nobody actually bothers if you are paying a bribe to someone, or if you are just doing something illegal. And it reflects in one of the recent surveys that TI International held in 2012, which is called Global Corruption Barometer, and our population actually said that yes, more than 90% of our population said that yeah, our judiciary and law enforcement and the political parties are also corrupt, along with other sectors, which includes health and education as well. So first of all, for example, there are only few organizations that are working in Bangladesh in anti-corruption sector, and Transparency International is the leading one, international TIB, and we have started working in here in 1996, and till then we have tried to advocate the government how to initiate some of the things like to enact the anti-corruption law, and also the right to information law, RTI. And it was with RTI that the youth movement in Bangladesh started. And we have tried to engage the youth because we believe right now more than 30% of the entire population is youth and 45% is children. So it was easier to target the youth to motivate them against corruption, towards transparency and accountability. And which also reflected in our last election that the youth actually voted for the nominees who were against corruption and who actually stood for something. And in some of the policies that the government has initiated in last few years, which was positive, and we are hoping that the scenario will get better. But now this year we are going to have the general election after 5 years. So the situation is right now is very tricky, and all the movements that we had for last 5 or 6 years is now kind of stalled. So we are not actually doing anything because of the current political situations. But in general, what we mainly do to engage the youth, we motivate them through we organize workshops, and we try to engage them through some activities. One of them is RTI, which I said, that we go to schools and we go to the hospitals, and we like to educate people through simple procedures and helping them with some of the process there, and we give them leaflets and describe them how this works and how they're empowered with this act. And the scenario from then, I think we have tried to reach more than 22 million people in Bangladesh to disseminate the information, the power of information. And for the last 1.5 years, TI Bangladesh is trying to actually establish the Anti-Corruption Commission, which we had, but which was kind of inactive. But as we are saying that it is the election years, and we are hoping that we will once again we will choose some clean and non-corrupt parliament member, because they're the decisions makers ultimately. So we are hoping that this year will be fruitful year for us to have better for a better next 5 years, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadia. Thank you for that introduction. I agree with you that motivating the youth in topics of corruption is very important to break the cycle of having generations being tolerant or being okay with corruption. And so on that note, I would like to introduce our last panelist, David Riveros Garcia. David is the president and co-founder of Reacción Juvenil de Cambio, Youth Change Reaction, a youth-led organization in Paraguay that uses civic education to promote transparency and social accountability in schools and universities.
Thank you very much, Margarita. Thank you, everyone, for holding this very interesting discussion on corruption. Again, my name is David Riveros Garcia. I'm the president of Reacción Juvenil de Cambio, a youth-led, completely volunteer-based organization in Paraguay. We work on civic education, as Margarita explained, and we try to emphasize our work on universities and high schools. We believe that youth should change from objects of change in very interesting political speeches, like we always listen to every political campaign, to actually subjects of change who can lead the process of reformation and inclusion in our country. Reacción Juvenil de Cambio has worked for 3 years now, and one of the most impressive things for me, and a fact I'm really proud of, so I said, is completely volunteer-based, meaning none of us are paid, and we have 2 teams now in the capital Asunción and in one of the most important cities, Ciudad del Este. We work with about 15 people in our team, and we have developed about 3 international projects and 1 national project in the past years. I would like to mention 2 to just point the examples of how we work. The first is Diálogos Transparentes, Transparency Talks, that we developed with Philippines in an international project funded by the World Bank Institute and the British Council. And what we did there was basically what we tried to do as an organization. We tried to provide you with the tools to analyze the juncture of politics, economics, and sociological problems in our country, mainly corruption. At the same time, we try to engage them with social activists and organizations, NGOs, and civil society in general, so they can actually cooperate with someone or something in order to develop a project. And finally, we try to bridge the other gap between civil society, students, and the government. So we try to really include and integrate all social actors relevant to the fight against corruption. Corruption in education, as you might know, is a very hard topic to define. We don't have a definite way of approaching it. Transparency International has a very interesting definition for it that also comes from the main definition, which is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. In the case in education, though, you see that corruption is also a culturally imposed problem, which means that youngsters and youth in general most times are taught to accept the system and play by its rules instead of going against it and trying to change it, which is what we're trying to change. In this project, Transparency Talks, we engaged journalists, lawyers, and also people from the government to give youth the skills that they would need to fight corruption. We also co-authored and contributed to the development of an anti-corruption toolkit, which was used and implemented during the whole project, which took like a year. So the kids actually had guidelines per se to follow whenever they're trying to fight corruption. And I think one of the most important factors when you're trying to teach students about the fight against corruption is that they have to realize it's not easy and it's not usually so safe, especially when you're going against the big fish, the so-called big fish. This project affected or benefited, to say it better, about 2,500 students directly, and we're talking about 3 cities around the country, which for a very small, relatively young and volunteer-based organization is huge. More recently, the second project we want to talk about is we call it the Youth in Politics. It was a panel, and we held it during the last political campaigns for the presidential elections, which were held a couple months ago. With our project, we tried to see if political parties actually had a platform for youth. We wanted to see if they were integrating youth in their process, not only as the people who would go out in the streets and do the propaganda or become the propaganda machine, but if they were also contributing to the policy making, to the agenda, to the political agenda of the party. And so for the first time ever in the history of our department at least, and I would really dare to say the history of the country, we brought young politicians to this debate, which was televised in the regional media. And we brought the question, are youth really protagonists or participants in politics, or is it just a mirage that politicians use? The debate went very well, and sadly, we saw that none of the parties, not even the most recent ones, not even the most progressive ones, had really a platform that included youth in the policy-making process or in the agenda for the politicians. They had a lot of insights on the political movement and on the system that has working, but most of them, even the people who were appointed to go to the debate, were selected in a very nepotistic way. So, although sad, the situation makes us realize that there is a lot of work to do, even in political parties, because reformation and change cannot be accomplished without political inclusion and participation. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges of our generation, really. We have seen springs, the democratic springs throughout the world, recently in Brazil, the Arab Spring that's now coming back, to say the least. And young people are being the protagonists of those demonstrations. The problem is what academia calls the democratic deficit. Although we demonstrate and we are indignated against corruption, at the time of elections we don't vote. And we can see that in the voting participation in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, in all continents really. And we have to change that. So we're also, with civic education, we're also trying to promote this sense and notion that youth should participate in politics. Because without political support, no movement can really do reform in the long term. And demonstrations stand at that. Demonstrations that might change a few things in the present, but don't really bring real change as prospects for the future. And that leads to frustration, and that leads to more disengagement, and that leads to this ever-increasing gap between youth and politics, which is what we're trying to change. So that will be my basic introduction to the work we do. We're very excited to help join the Global Transparency in Education Network, the G10, just in Lithuania during the summer school developed by Transparency International. I think this network has a lot of potential. It's a new initiative by Transparency International, and what I'm doing now is just try to promote it, because I think everyone should know about it, and we'll see a lot in October when the first publication will come about, and we'll be able to evaluate how corruption is affecting education. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that very interesting presentation. Before we go on to, I have a couple of questions for you guys. Before we go on, I would like to remind the audience to feel free to send in any questions or comments once again through the hashtag WYMD Live. We have received a couple of questions and comments so far. I would just like to ask you guys something real quick. David, it catches my attention when you were talking about how your organization is confirmed of all volunteers, young volunteers, and this leads me to my next question. How committed is the youth in each of your countries in fighting corruption? How do you how are you able to transmit this awareness of the causes of corruption, and how do you get them to constantly engage and constantly be active and fighting against corruption?
Okay, I think I'll go first. We have this approach of building critical masses, because we believe that without a critical mass, even if you have access to information, even if you have systems and methodologies to go about denouncing corruption, you cannot really eradicate it. The critical mass approach that we use is based on Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed methodology, which is a very interesting book. I will recommend everyone to read it. And it really goes about going to the communities and finding the answer to a question, to a social problem with the community. As civil society, I think we make the mistake of always trying, of believing we have the right answer, that we have the idea that can solve a problem, and we go and we impose it. We, in a different way, are oppressing people from the real freedom of they themselves finding a solution for their problems. So we go to the communities, we ask the question, we developed even a new definition of corruption and how it affects people, and so they have this primacy, they have this feeling of they are involved, this is something affecting them, they own the problem, and as they own the problem, they want to do something to fight it. So with our approach, we have seen a lot of engagement in our communities, and it's an approach that's very enthusiastically developed by Sophia, which is our executive director. And with that, with the volunteer movement we have grown from a team of 5 people in the first 2 years to, as I said, a team of 15 to 20 people. So it's really about making someone own the problem without really imposing or giving the right answer for people, but asking them to develop their own answers and then helping them to solve the problem.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that answer. Sadia?
Well, for what we do to engage the youth and to like informing the anti-corruption messages and becoming aware and act against corruption is something 3 different issues. So at first we start with informing them that what they think about it, how they see corruption, because it's such a natural practice. It's a practice for us. So it's quite difficult to like engage them in the first place. So we take them with what we have done for our youth engagement and support, which is called Yes Movement, and we have more than 5,000 volunteers in it, and it's one of the largest volunteer group in Bangladesh, and they're very active, and we go to the schools and we go to the colleges and all the university campuses, as David said, that you have to start from there, and we actually try to engage them in conversations, how they feel about it and how they perceive corruption and how they would like to see Bangladesh in next 5 years, or how they would like to. Bangladesh is a very big concept, so how they like to see their community or their area, if it's a corruption-free zone. Then when they come up with answers, we ask them that how would you like to engage yourself in it? What would be your participation? How you would like to act? Then they would come up with some resolution that we would like to do this and that, and we give them the chance to do that. It might be a very simple thing. They might would like to organize something very small. It could be competition or any sort of competition. It could be photography or cultural competition, music, singing, anything. Then if it goes with us and if we agree to it and they agree with us, then we actually give them the support, logistic support, that how they should do it. We actually monitor them from time to time, and we come up with like how much and come up with another participation program when they come up, and if we try to see if they have been able to change anything within them, not in their community but within them. Then after like 6 months or a year, we ask them to do something for in a greater scenario, for in a greater aspect, that now it's time to do something for in a bit large context, and that's how we proceed. it's like a thing, it's like taking baby steps, not doing something big at first, but taking a small step one at a time.
Thank you, Sadia. Yes, I can see there's a similarity between the way you and David's organizations approach things, which is basically owning the problem, analyzing, seeing what it is that you want fixed, or identifying a specific outcome and then targeting a specific problem to reach that outcome. What about you, Ahmed, in your experience? Ahmed?
Get that? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, what was the question again?
In your experience, how is it that you keep the youth engaged in this fight against corruption? How do you engage them constantly so that they are not, so that it's not just a temporary engagement or involvement?
Thank you very much. I think for us in Uganda, one of the things that we've come to realize that it's our generational responsibility to be part of a movement that is contributing towards our next great story. And how we do that, we have lots of similarities, with David, with Sadia, whose generational, intergenerational conversations are very important for us in terms of where do we want to see the future of our country by, defining what sort of the bright future that we want to have. That sort of future where values are critical, the values of honesty, values of integrity, values of dignity, because these are the values that have been eroded in for in our country or in our societies for so many years. So how we constantly do that is, for example, promoting integrity and accountability among ourselves as youth-led organizations or as informal civic associations. We have a platform called the Youth Governance Group that was initiated. It's a partnership that was initiated between me and a colleague of mine called Emmanuel Peter America from Uganda Youth Network, and it's been we have something called the anti-corruption mechanism, where it's something like it's a platform where we peer review ourselves and make that information public, to almost the entire country, so that we're able to position ourselves in a way that much as we are also seen to be anti-corruption crusaders, we should ourselves be seen to be people of integrity, and that's something that has been taken up. And we have, for example, we have school ordinances on corruption. We have pledges that have been signed in schools, similar to what David is doing, trying to sort of engage the student movement, engage the out of school youth movement to appreciate that if we're going to build a community that is corruption free, it has to start with us, with institutions, with individuals, and we've made it part of us. And I think it's something that is coming out. I think connected to what David said earlier, I think that was Sadia, that we also try to make sure that even the leaders that we put into government, these are the leaders who are seen as anti-corruption fighters or crusaders. For example, the other thing I should have told you that Uganda is one of the countries that has almost the highest. We are the most. We have the youngest population in the entire Africa. You have close to about half of our population is below the age of 15 years. So our intentions is to invest in this young generation to appreciate the values of living in a society that is corruption free, appreciating the values of transparency, honesty, because we believe that these are the values that are critical towards defining the progression of the country that we want. And we're trying to, for example, our pledges have been translated in close to about 70 languages, local languages. We're an heterogeneous country, and these messages are appreciated across all dialects. These are some of the efforts that we want the message to sink in society going forward, for us to build a more democratic society where everyone appreciates that they have a responsibility to building a brighter future for themselves. And for us, a brighter future is a future that is corruption free.
Thank you, Ahmed, for that wonderful answer. I do have a follow-up question here from Badr Selik in our audience. And he says, and I guess this is for all the panelists, after keeping the youth engaged, are there some measures to motivate them to keep working in these anti-corruption initiatives or campaigns, workshops, etc.? And whoever would like to answer that question can go ahead and open the floor.
All right. I think one of the things that I should have actually highlighted a little bit earlier is um, corruption related activism is not something that is juicy or something that entices or encourages sort of entices the young generation to participate so much. Because, for example, in our country, if it goes to the big fish, we have legislations that deny. Because, for example, we have a bill in Parliament that is called the Public Order Management Bill that sort of looks at silencing the activists, denying us our civic rights of assembly or freedoms of speech, more especially when you're speaking against the regime in place. And for us, we feel that these are certain gestures that tend to demotivate the young people. But oftentimes, one of the things that we've come to one of the hope in this generation is we have one of the youngest parliaments in Africa, and that draws more inspiration to the young generation. We usually carry a message that corruption is a threat to your next door opportunity. So that alone motivates the young people for them to not to deny them that opportunity by simply silencing them. So if we tell them that corruption is the threat to your opportunity, that alone motivates them to guard that next opportunity. It could be a job, it could be like a better quality education, it could be better health facility. So such messages are key motivators, but it's not about giving them incentives or something like that, because that in a way would also sound to be a little bit corrupting them to fight corruption. But we also try to use means that can easily resonate with their inspirations. That's how we motivate them. But otherwise, working in areas like Africa where the laws can easily be tilted, where if you talk about corruption, you're touching the next maybe the son of the big president or the minister, or so that alone has security to our own lives, because some of us have had cases of where you're arrested or where you're threatened to they will close your operation as an organization and things like that. But these alone do not deter us, because for us we believe it's us who have to make better the world to be.
Thank you, Ahmed. I have another question out here. I have a question for David. You were talking about certain consequences when it comes to fighting corruption. And I've always said that when you're trying to sweep the stairs, you cannot sweep them from the bottom up. It has to be from up to bottom. And the same works, it works the same way with corruption. You cannot start from the bottom up. You have to start with the big fish and set a precedent. So here's a question from Duwai Rodriguez for you. In your experience, what are some consequences in going against the big fish, and how do you overcome these consequences?
Thank you, Duwai, for the question. I think it's really a dual approach. We have to do the bottom-up, the grassroots movements, and try to work our way up, and also the top-down approach. I also see that impunity is a very big challenge for everyone. If we can fight impunity, then we can inspire people. When we get some of the big fish, we get convictions, or we get them to lose the first battle, then more people want to join because they see the effects and they feel empowered. And going about, talking about the big fish, so I would tell him, have you ever seen a shoal of fish? How they move in big numbers and to evade the predators like sharks and whatnot. So I think it's the same with the youth movement. Security is in numbers. My personal experience when I was 17, I led a demonstration against corruption, mobilizing a few couple thousand students, and that led to very dangerous situations. We got the military involved, the police. I almost got to jail. I received death threats, and that kind of things from political parties and other people. And always, your security will be in the numbers. The time they can reduce your group and isolate you as an activist or make you into small groups, then they can do whatever they want to you because they have that power, especially in very corrupted countries like mine or in developing societies. So the approach that I would use, and it might sound naive, but if it has worked for my team and for that movement a few years ago, is to really make a family out of your movement. To take the time not only to go and demonstrate, but to meet in groups and discuss about corruption, about the effects that that has to society, come into a dialogue about the problems and how it is affecting you, how you can take part in it, and how you can change things and listen to others. So the more you integrate your group, the more of a family you have, and the more consistency you will get whenever you're doing something. And this will also translate to efficiency and efficacy in whatever work you do with your team. So again, it is in numbers, it is in integration use. It's not just rallying people, it's not just going to the streets to shout cans and protest. It's really in the whole process. You have to make a family out of your team or your movement, and that will lead you to success, I believe.
Thank you, David. I would like to add a little bit of that too as well, because I know that you're also part of a global network, and when you work in networks and you communicate constantly what it is you're doing, where it is that you're working, it also creates another structure of support behind you with the work that you're doing on a daily basis. I have another question from the audience, and this is for all the panelists. So I would like to go ahead and start with Sadia, and then maybe we can go in order, and each of you can give your perspectives on this. This is a very interesting question. Do you believe that building democratic society is possible with corruption in every part of society? And should we fight corruption first and then build democratic societies, or vice versa?
I think it's a parallel process. I think it's not that we can skip one and do another. We have to keep the both in a balance and move forward. Like I would like to add a real life scenario in that with like the answer David just gave the question. The answer to the question that 2 years ago, before this government, two of the major leading countries, the party leaders were arrested because of corruption, and they were in jail for 2 years. And sometimes it becomes very frustrating for us when we see that they have got out of jail without any sort of judiciary process or any legal actions. They were just in jail, and they got out without taking any actions against them after 2 years. So as an activist, it's very frustrating for us. Sometimes we actually feel if it's worth it. But sometimes when we see something like that, like catching the big fish, which includes 2 former prime ministers from our country, then we also become very hopeful that, okay, change is possible for a country like us, and for example, like for Paraguay or Bangladesh or Uganda. So we are still very hopeful that we are trying to work from both ends. And we believe that at some point, though it's parallel, at some point those 2 points will meet. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadia. Ahmed, would you like to continue a little bit on that question?
I think to me this is one of the greatest questions that really informs the discourse that we're having now, because you need to. I like what David says, that it's more of a dual approach. Whereas we're focusing a lot of our energies and efforts in building and strengthening grassroots movements for them to be able to understand, for example, the different tactics, as of then the knowledge, the tactics, the methods that we can use to further, address these issues of corruption. How do we push our agenda forward? At the same time, it's also our more of obligation or responsibility or constitutional responsibility as young people to be able to craft what sort of democratic state we would wish to see, because from my experience, you know um, uh, when you have a healthy democratic society that appreciates key principles of transparency, there's honesty, there's accountability, there's less corruption. I wouldn't say that there's completely no corruption at all. And what is our responsibility as a generation, or as young people, is to push for that sort of society, not necessarily saying that, let's abandon corruption and focus on building society. To me, I think we need to balance our energies here, and in a way have multifaceted efforts, or build collaborations and networks, so that other people can be, for example, if you have a bigger a coalition or a cooperation, um, you share responsibilities. Others could take up building and strengthening society, or the other would be very very aggressive in either naming and shaming the corrupt, or pushing for anti-corruption laws or better institutions. But for us as a generation, as young people, we push for a dual approach, because we need more of a democratic society. Because when you have a democratic society, you have better service delivery, you have voice, and there is more of a, my voice is heard, and it counts. There's better to enjoy in a country like that, but still it's more of a balanced approach that is required. So for us, we think that for us to completely do away with corruption, you need to have a dual approach.
Thank you, Ahmed. And David, I would like to hear your thoughts on this as well.
I really think there's not much to add to the brilliant explanations we just heard. However, what I would add is that for a democratic system to work, inclusion is paramount. Inclusion of the less privileged, inclusion of those forgotten by development, of economic inclusion and whatnot. Corruption hinders that inclusion. It is a big barrier. You don't have access to education because of corruption. You sometimes don't have access to public services because of corruption. So it's, as Sadia said, it's an integrated thing. You fight corruption because you want a democratic society, because corruption is a big barrier for that. I think all democratic societies have corruption, at least in a very small sense of it, but nobody is free from corruption. No country is free from corruption. No sector is free from corruption. So, as I said, if we're really talking about a democratic society, then we fight corruption because we want inclusion. And like my other two peers just said, it is an integrated approach. It's not something you can do separate. You do it together.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that response. And I agree with you, definitely. Corruption is not something that only happens in the public sector. It happens in every aspect of human life. It is just important that we understand how corruption works, and that we understand how to identify corruption in order to be able to fight it. I do have another interesting question out here from Indonesia. And the following question is as follows, and it's also for all the panelists. We as young people are a new and fresh generation that should find and try any ideas for attacking the spreading of corruption. What could we do then in real actions to involve the law courts in solving corruption cases and habits? I don't know if maybe David, you would like to start off this one.
Yes, it's a big question, right? What can I do to really do something? Go and talk to your local representative. Call him. Send him an email if you can. Try to investigate if you have access to public information. My country doesn't have legislation on access to public information, so it's not really my right to go to the municipality or local government and say, I would like to know what has been going on this and that project. So really, just stop sitting there and go, and whatever question you have, go and ask. And if you see that there was a road built in front of your house, check how much was the budget and how much was really spent on that road, and just compare the two of them, and then raise questions and let other people know about that. This is just a really small example. You can do it with really anything. Talk with your neighbor, talk with your friends. Try to raise awareness about this by asking questions and moving, and act against corruption. That's the biggest thing. This might sound silly and basic. This is really how you start. Just do something. Whatever question you have, raise it, and let other people know about your questions. That's my simple answer to it.
Thank you, David. A simple but great answer. I agree with you completely. Asking around and trying to understand and figure out what is going on in your local communities is the first step in fighting corruption. You can't really do anything if you're not willing to move and be active about it. Sadia, maybe you have some other thoughts on this?
No, I agree with David. That's what we did with the RTI Act. That's why it's so important to have that act in your country. And that's why maybe you need to start a campaign to enact RTI in your country, that we need this. And the next step is the huge. Next step is much more huge, that you need to practice the act. They have given us the access, but we don't know how to actually practice it, how to submit an application, how to ask that question, who is the right person to go to, and we need to know that. And once this act is in your country, and then you will be able, there will be like information outside of the office and outside of that particular building, that you need to go to this person for this purpose, and you can actually call the prime minister, or you can actually call the president, or send an email on if nobody's there listening to you within 30 days, and if there is no action from the authority. So things could be like that. You are the person with power. You have voted for. You have the right to vote, and we are the people, and so we have the power to act. And you can start anytime. You can start anytime. That's it. The power is yours.
Thank you, Sadia. That's a very interesting point. I think people forget and how much power really lies in civil society. A clear example is in El Salvador, our Right to Information Act is a civil society effort, that we carried out for 5 years until the legislation was finally approved. So I think people need to remember that you have a lot of power in your actions, and that is one of the most important things that we should not forget. I'm sorry. Ahmed, do you have any other additional comments that you would like to add about this question?
Perhaps these are my final thoughts, and you've just talked about the Access to Information Act. We've successfully pursued the enactment of we have a coalition called the Youth Governance Group, the enactment of the Access to Information Act of 2005. And one of the things that I can tell my colleague from Indonesia is we've come to realize that you cannot fight corruption when you're not legally empowered. Basic legal empowerment is very important. Get the information, especially about the different legislations, the laws in place, understanding the institutions, because you might talk about going or writing to someone, but then you don't know either the procedures, you don't know who to write to, you don't know who to approach. For us, we feel that basic knowledge, empowerment or legal empowerment is very important. Understanding the different laws and the institutions, the legal institutions in place in a particular country, and corruption is not an activity that it's not only an individual pursuit by lone activists, that we cannot take it up uh, as only activists. We need the partnership of, for example, the private sector, because in our context in Uganda and in Africa in general, it manifests a lot in business areas, especially the private sector. So we feel that we need to organize ourselves. Organizing, community organizing or building movements is very important, and partnerships or collaborations. And then eventually, that's why collective advocacy is very important. To me, I always think that the basic principle of addressing corruption is with the numbers. So if you have the facts right, if you have your facts right, if you're organized and you have the right collaborations and cooperations, I think the fight can be addressed.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you very much. And before we start wrapping up, I would just like to see if maybe Sadia and David have some final comments as well before we wrap up today's discussion.
Ladies first, please.
Well, thank you, and I think it's good to see both of you and get to know Ahmed. And I think it has become not a national approach; it has become an international approach, a global approach, and we are making the other from other countries as well. And maybe we are working together, and we will be working together, and we will be engaging youth from across the nations. And I think we can take examples from Uganda and so also from Paraguay and also from other countries as well. And I hope that some of the things that I have shared is useful to some of my friends who are working in this field and who wants to act in future. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadia. David?
I believe we face a great challenge, this generation of ours. I can see right now that it's obvious that our democratic institutions have not kept pace with the technological innovations of our time, with our demands as citizens, especially the youth. And at the same time, we're not providing any answers. Youth is demanding, protesting, but we're not really giving a new system or model of working. And we have to find that answer. Corruption is just one of the many problems. I see very problems coming up in the future. You can see demonstrations, the revolutions all around the world. But revolutions really happen in our minds and hearts. This is the stage, the streets and the squares like Tahrir Square, Taksim Square, Praça de João in Brazil. Those are secondary stages. I believe that if we really want to make a revolution, you have to engage, you have to commit, you have to inspire. You have to become a politician, a teacher, a leader, a brother, a sister, a role model for people. And for corruption, I always believe it's really role modeling. We have to give the example of our lives to other people, and hopefully successful examples. So that would be my concluding remarks to everyone listening or watching this. To be a role model for the future generations and to inspire them to commit and engage so that we can really fight corruption effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. And so then real quick, Ahmed, maybe one last closing comment that you would like to add?
Personally, I would wish to say thank you very much to the World Youth Movement. It's an initiative that I've struggled so much to be part of for years, and I must say that I'm really, really happy that my dream finally comes, into reality. I've always wanted to be part of this movement. I've read a lot about the movement, and there's so many works, there's so many sharings, because being a democratic activist down here, so you need to really learn a few best practices here. To my colleagues, Sadia, David, and the other moderators, thank you very much. I've taken down your contacts, so I'm going to try to look for you in the different networks so that we can build more synergy, partnerships, and continue to share best practices, a few learnings on how we can better the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Margarita. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Ahmed.
you.
And once again, well, thank you to the audience that joined us this morning. Thank you to the Hurford Foundation for making this possible. And I am hoping that this panel served of a lot of help to a lot of the people who are engaging in this daily fight against corruption. And so once again, to the panelists, thank you very much for being a part of this today. And I hope that we continue to work together in future initiatives against corruption. You guys have a great day.